I feel like there are so many algorithms out there that are trying to figure out what I like. Spotify thinks I'll like this new album. YouTube thinks I should stick around to watch one more video. And no joke, last night, I just realized this. My wife and I watched an entire new series on Netflix because Netflix was 98% sure that we were going to love it. So today we're talking about using AI to predict consumer tastes. My guests are Elias. He's the CEO and co-founder of Qloo, which is an AI platform that intends to understand and predict consumer tastes, and Sam Delisi, who's an operating partner with Moderne Ventures. Now, they're a VC firm that's recently invested in Qloo. Plus, Sam has a background in commercial real estate, so he's going to connect the dots for all of our real estate listeners. Now, I want to ask them how these prediction models are going to impact specifically retail and shopping centers. Plus, we're going to do a live test. We're going to put Qloo's prediction model to the test on me. You're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL. And I am here to welcome my two guests, Alex and Sam. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Sam, I'll start with you. Tell us your name and what you do.
Sure. I'm the operating partner at Moderne Ventures. We are we're a strategic venture capital firm and growth equity firm. We take a generalist approach to vertical investing, which means we look outside of the markets that we focus on, which is real estate, fintech, and insurtech. So we look at opportunities, companies that are not currently serving those markets, and we find companies that we believe have application and in the industry. So I think about Qloo, and that's the perfect example of this. So we saw the Qloo data and knew it would have amazing application in the real estate world. And after meeting Alex and meeting the team, we knew it was a perfect fit for us. So we're real excited about that approach to real estate, to investing in the venture world.
Alex, same question, your name and what you do.
Awesome. I'm Elias. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Qloo. We started this business over a decade ago with the goal of understanding consumer taste at scale on a global level. So think about the algorithms that undergird some of your favorite products, whether it be Netflix within the world of film and TV. They've come around and become a customer, or Spotify and music, or even bridging the divide over to the geospatial and transactional categories. So things like Expedia in the world of travel. We wanted to kind of bring all that sort of intelligence and data science into a single platform that developers could use. In this case, I mean software developers, but also real estate developers at scale. And many of our large integrations are immensely highly scaled. So talking about billions of network calls a month. But we're super excited about addressing new industries. We've seen immense potential impact in the world of real estate, and we've been thrilled to partner with Moderne recently as well. So excited to share more.
Well, you mentioned Netflix. I didn't realize that you were working with Netflix when I wrote that introduction this morning. So that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of a match made in heaven for various reasons, but they have amazing data science that they built a significant muscle in the AI space as well, but really within film and TV, and specifically pertaining to the series that they actually distribute. Their excitement around Qloo revolves around the ability to look outside of that, not only to the broader nexus of media, so other film and TV that they don't distribute, other regions, Bollywood, but also to other categories of media and even transactional categories. And what's interesting is even they are very focused on geolocational insights. So they're kind of going the other way and thinking, and we can talk more about this, I'm sure, but thinking about activations and working with different real estate developers on getting certain TV series out, and it's been fascinating to see them use our intelligence to kind of cross that divide between the media nexus and then what people are actually doing and out in the real world. So yeah, it's exciting.
That's fascinating. So, I was doing some reading. I saw Qloo described as a consumer taste engine, and I kind of think about that as tastes can be anything. It can be online. It can be in the built environment. How did you start Qloo? You've been around for a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a super important point you bring up because I think there has been, structurally speaking, this tendency to view taste in these silos, and that's what a lot of the kind of actual technology, and it's really a function of it being warehoused within primarily B2C companies that are looking to distribute their own inventory. So you have a lot of walled gardens, a lot of silos. One of the most important aspects of Qloo is that we're fully privacy centric. We were long before, and this is by design. My background's on the legal side. I did my law degree focused on internet privacy prior to starting Qloo. And so the way we ultimately began was thinking that consumers ought to have this lens of their taste and this ability to actually explore and interact with these algorithms in a way that was actually agnostic to distribution. So we launched our own applications. We scaled to a panel of north of 1 million users. This was back in 2012 and 13. And then later, we started to realize there was immense demand for this kind of intelligence at scale to make other applications smarter. So we had our idea of what a recommendation service might look like. But one of our first customers was actually Twitter. Back in 2015, they were looking to launch a commerce product, and that ushered us into this world of kind of empowering other products and developers. And now we have a very wide range of customers across industries, not just Netflix, but we work with market leaders across financial services, across the hotel OTA landscape, and so. Qloo evolved very naturally. We knew there was a data asset to build and this kind of structured intelligence to build. And, as many are now learning, AI generally is only as good as the data that feeds it. And the things that Qloo is really focused on, A, is privacy centricity. So everything we do, all the inference that's generated, doesn't require anything about anyone's identity. It's purely based on context. It's based on the Netflix show, the restaurant entity or merchant ID. It's based on sort of correlating these different items, people, places, things that exist in the world. But the other side of it is that we have a unique moat around our business because we built this data asset as well as the pipelines well over a decade now that feed our AI, and we uniquely have the training rights over these. As we look forward, we've obviously navigated the waters with the privacy regulations. We work with a ton of EU firms in the wake of GDPR. One of our largest shareholders alongside Modern is AXA, the French insurance company. So we're well versed in sort of the heart of privacy. But I think as we look forward, there's going to be tremendous regulatory activity around AI. And, we've started to really build a reputation as kind of one of the forward-looking providers that will be robust in the wake of, a vast amount of regulatory onslaught. So anyways, that's some of the broad history. But there's some really interesting themes we're now looking at in the real estate world in particular that we're super excited about.
I'm just so heartened by your background in privacy because I just feel like everything about the future is me giving up all of my my private information. So it's nice to hear that at least one company is cognizant of that fear.
Yeah, it really doesn't have to be that way is the reality. And there's amazing ways to understand and build intelligence that doesn't require sort of leveraging people's identity data that they didn't fully consent to. So yeah, thank you for that.
So Sam, question for you. So there was Modern participated in the recent Series C funding, 25 million with Qloo. And I know your background is in commercial real estate. I was looking at your LinkedIn. It turns out we overlapped briefly at Insignia ESG in the early 2000s and the late 90s. So why? I'm assuming part of this funding is going to help Qloo expand into real estate and probably some other industries as well. What's the opportunity that you see in real estate?
Thank you so much for that question. It's really, you're only limited by your imagination in terms of what this data can provide. And I think about it in terms of placemaking for developers, whether that's for a multifamily building that would be coming out of the ground, or even a repositioning, a retail product in terms of, a mall, or just the retail at the base of your building, retail everywhere. I think there's a real fit there. And because what you're able to use all of this affinity data in a way that helps you place make to attract the right people to your development and to your project. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So I'm interested, just like hypothetically, a little bit more about how this would work. So you could, for example, you're building a new shopping center. That's my kind of universe. And you're thinking about what kind of restaurants and stores you want to put in it. So, would you, Alex, maybe this is a question for you. So would you get, I don't know, how would you, if you, would you get like zip codes of potential shoppers and then feed that in and it would spit out where they'd like to shop? Is that what we're talking about here?
So Qloo actually operates at an even more granular level, which is one of the really exciting things about it. In 2019, we launched our geospatial APIs. One of our large customers there is actually JC globally. So they're one of the largest out-of-home, almost all the billboards you see around the world, particularly in high-value propositions like airports, and are their assets. And more than 13% of their inventory is digital. So they have this ability to have real-time bidding. So it's almost like, we spoke with the Modern team, it's almost like real estate on steroids, because you're talking about a hyper-specific locale. You're talking about, at best, a short-term lease of 4 weeks that, you want to get the most relevant advertiser on. And so Qloo, our geospatial capabilities go down to precision 7, which is roughly 150 meter geohashes. So we could actually ascertain probabilistically everything from the most correlated fashion brands to even TV and movies and music, the whole media nexus, video games. So we've been doing great work at programmatic scale globally with JC. We're helping to decision, if Apple TV comes to them with a new series, what are the most correlated assets overlaid on their inventory. And so, as we begin to think more broadly, Qloo's obviously had there's been a large productization effort around these highly scaled programmatic use cases where it's millions to billions of requests a month. With 5 millisecond latencies. As we start to think more broadly, the real estate world they're making immense, hugely expensive decisions that have multi-year implications. And so, our taste data is fairly unparalleled in its granularity. And there's just this great opportunity to basically be able to say, for a location, here's what the highest affinity entities would be. Here's what might be correlated to other areas, and so on. And there's actually there's 2 anecdotes that come to mind from kind of our early explorations in this space. So one of the things we did to kind of begin to explore whether there's a market here is really pull data for developers and say, is this interesting? Like, run it through our system. And two of the big names that come to mind. So with Caruso affiliated, they were building a new project in the Palisades, and actually did. And what was interesting about that, he's obviously one of the best in the industry. And there was, and now this is just more of a personal anecdote, but there was a party he held that was fairly intimate. And at the time, I was invited to that, and there was another person there that I was surprised to run into in a different state, which was a barber on the Lower East Side, literally a barber that used to cut my hair. And I sort of asked him, I'm like, what do we were both just kind of like, what are we both doing here? What are you doing here? And I realized that Rick was so intuitive around that he literally wanted to meet, every potential tenant you could imagine, and sort of capture this long tail of taste. And so, you begin to think about Qloo. That kind of intuition is hard to come by, and he's someone who has an enormous empathy. He's not of that demographic, but he understands, what people might want. And so it's that sort of intuition that I think Qloo at scale could deliver in a programmatic way, where you can really pull niche correlations and associations as well as very mainstream and help bolster a case for these kinds of decisions. So we're in the late stages of actually productizing a research tool that is entirely built around our AI and our data sets, and would really empower that kind of intuition at scale.
One example I think of in my world right now is restaurants. There's so many restaurants that are looking for space right now, very limited
Right.
available space. So every landlord that has any half decent vacant restaurant space has, 5 or 6 restaurants battling to get that one space. So the landlord is, I can imagine, it's like, well, which one is the right one? A tool like this can help you answer that question.
No question.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So would this be, and I know it sounds like you're still figuring it out, but it would be like a subscription thing people would access through some kind of portal?
Yeah, so that's what we're currently contemplating. For our larger kind of industrial scale use cases, it's price per query and rate limited and so on. But I think the idea here, and we've already begun to kind of beta test this. But the idea here is basically making it a portal that's available for a nearly unlimited range of potential research, and we could show some of the types of queries that we could generate, that are truly fascinating. But that's the current idea.
I mean, it makes me think about a number of years ago when kind of mobility data came about, and suddenly,
Right,
we were always relying on just census data, and it was very
right.
big picture. And then we get this mobility data, and suddenly we're just so much more granular level. It seems like now we get to go to that level, but around people's tastes.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Sam, I wanted to ask you one more question about the VC scene right now, which it's not my area, but I've heard through the grapevine it's tough times. What are you seeing in your world?
I think capital markets writ large are having some issues. We have a much different approach than most VCs, and I know people say that all the time, but it's really true in our case. In that, and again, I think Alex can sort of speak to this a little bit. When we invest in a company and we bring companies into our modern passport program, which is a real estate immersion program. So it's a 6-month program that companies apply to, and or when we invest in the company, they go through the program as well, and we're able to really help these companies develop their product and their marketing approach in a way that we know will land well with our more than 1,000 real estate companies that we work with. And so we really help these companies grow in this passport program by honing their skills, making introductions, exposure processes, and our companies seem to do much better than what you see in the marketplace. So we have a very low loss ratio, and our companies are still doing pretty well. So we're pretty excited about where we are at. But I think writ large, if you don't have some kind of advantage like we have with the passport program, it's probably a little tougher sledding.
Yeah,
I could
yeah, I think
definitely just to double down on that. I could definitely offer the founder's perspective, and we have a lot of great shareholders. We've been very lucky, but I think Modern, does truly stand out in terms of rolling up their sleeves and helping to commercialize. And it's much more than, money in strict terms is fungible, but I think the fact that they are tirelessly making introductions, helping us productize. It ends up being like a proxy industry and broader sales arm, product management arm, and so on. It's really extraordinary, and I think that's a very surefire way to generate alpha for LPs ultimately. So we're really excited about it, and we're only about 6 months into the partnership. So
Are you guys ready to put this to the test?
yeah, absolutely. So basically, Qloo can respond to immense granularity in terms of preferences on the input and geolocation and so on. And I was gonna do. You mentioned restaurants being a high value. I'm almost inclined to do a completely live test as well.
I love it.
And where are you? What city exactly are you based in? You're
So,
in.
so I'm tricky. I'm outside of Indianapolis, Indiana, in the countryside.
So if we jump in here, if we were to use downtown Indianapolis as a proxy location, would that be pretty? That's an area you know pretty well. If we're going to put this to the test.
Yes, let's do Indianapolis.
Okay, great. And so just as a showcase, and this is purely for fun. Let's pick a totally different category. So give me one of your favorite music artists, for instance. And
Oh my
there's over
gosh.
500 million tastes that Qloo can ultimately cover. But
So I love music. That's a very tough question. The artist that I love that I was listening to last night, do you know Neutral Milk Hotel? Have you heard that name
Neutral
before?
Milk Hotel, no, is that
Yeah.
so that
It's
there it
it's
goes.
an indie
Neutral.
artist. Indie artist very came out with this seminal album in the mid to late 90s. So,
Okay. Okay,
Wow.
so Clue has it in our database here.
okay.
And if we were, so this is purely saying now, show me the most correlated restaurants. And I can't guarantee you there because we only return things that have, statistical significant and positive correlations. But here it is, Neutral Milk Hotel, showing the most correlated restaurants to downtown Indianapolis. And here's some of the top results. Are these any that you recognize?
Yeah, I've eaten the second one, Delisi. I've eaten that there like 4 or 5 times.
There we go.
Number
Was
two.
could you tell the folks at home this was a completely totally
That
ad hoc challenge.
that was amazing. I want to understand how that connection came about between a random band. It how is it like? Just tell me a little bit more about how this works.
Qloo basically has a globe spanning database that we've assembled over a decade. So we have, and this is no small feat, it's very conceptually simple, but we basically want to understand every person, place, thing that exists in the public globally. So we translate across languages. We have, every music artist from Europe. So we'll cover the Parisian French indie band as well as the US ones and so on. So imagine this globe spanning database. With that, we have an immense amount of properties associated with them. So something Qloo is fairly unique on is building what you'd call these knowledge graphs, where we don't just understand that this and this is a music artist. We would have extremely deep data on what type of music, what that means, who they're influenced by, etc. So there's this big kind of almost Wikipedia-like effort to understand the DNA of all these entities. And so that'll also include retail, it'll include fashion. And we've spent an enormous amount of resources on this. So where there wasn't data we could procure, license, we build from scratch. So we had a team from Parsons and FIT in New York City help us meta tag and catalog the genomes of fashion brands and designers, season by season. So this has been a long standing effort. And then layering on top of that, we have very explicit learning rights. So in our API integrations, when people are using it to the tune of billions of requests a month, there's an explicit learning right where we don't know anything about anyone's identity. It's purely just that we can correlate entities together. So if there's a request fired off that includes particular music artist and particular, brand, we're able to associate those things. We also have some first party data. So we acquired a company called Taste Dive, which is a very popular recommendation engine. that spans 12 categories. It's used globally. It's very, very powerful in that it has this highly symmetrical panel. So basically, the respondents on the Taste Eye platform will contribute an average of 42.7 signals across spanning areas as disparate as literature to places and so on. So now you imagine this enormous proprietary pipeline of sentiment data. So we don't know anyone's email, anyone's name. All we know is that certain entities co-occur at different velocities. And that's where our AI comes in, where we now interrelate all these things. And so we've reached a level of critical mass where we can now layer on these AI models and say, let's, for the geospatial side of things, let's literally reduce the entire planet to a grid that's at precision 7, and let's run our models and see what is most, essentially what the AI is doing is saying what is most unexpectedly correlated to this particular point on this grid at scale. It's an enormous amount of compute and cost, but we're running these models continuously such that any person using our service could instantly get results. So typically our API, like that particular query we just did, took less, likely server to server, less than 5 milliseconds. Most of our use cases are around helping companies sell things more effectively, allocate media more effectively, et cetera. I think for the real estate world, the interface we're essentially putting out will allow for people to layer these queries in themselves, just as I just did. So if it were a developer in any given area on the planet, and they have a sense of who their proxy audience is, or they want to understand existing centers and what the tastes are, it's an incredibly unique lens that wouldn't really be revealed if you were just purely relying on other metrics like footfall traffic data and other things. And it's it's exciting, and I think it's sort of the right time for us to roll this out, because I think a lot more people are focusing on leveraging AI. There's actually real estate firms that have prop tech teams as well that use our APIs directly. Another anecdote I'll give that gave us sort of early conviction in the space. One of our shareholders, our early shareholders, is Barry Sternlicht, who founded Starwood and currently runs Starwood Capital, and obviously has a big real estate footprint and so on. And it's another example of someone who has immense intuition. And so we ran projects for a hotel he was developing kind of early on in us thinking about this space. And he was very interested in understanding how to amenitize it, what retail to bring into the resort properties, what restaurants to bring in, restaurateurs, all the way down to what shampoos to put in the bathrooms. And this is a unique case where, so we pulled data for him and did all sorts of different proxies and audiences and competitive hotels, and looked at, literally like things like health and beauty correlations. And we sent him all the data, sort of not expecting him to really be personally engaged with it, because he has a big team that helps him out. And then I start getting emails, at 12:30 a.m., 1 a.m., just him personally digging in and like really trying to understand what this means, what health and beauty, down to, so he was up, and I know it was because I know he was on the East Coast at the time. And so he was, literally 1 a.m. firing off emails, trying to figure out the perfect taste in shampoo to amenitize this property. And so, we want to make that sort of intuition available at scale and allow people to do that kind of research. And I think there's an immense opportunity here to do that.
It's just absolutely fascinating. I'm in the middle of finishing up a report on celebrity-backed restaurants. So
okay.
Celebrity
Wow.
chefs and all kinds of stuff like that. And they've been, for a number of years, really exploding. And a lot of them are going into hotels.
Right.
And resorts, especially Las Vegas, but also like big musician stuff in Nashville and all kinds of stuff. And developers take a huge risk on these celebrity brands. And I imagine if they had some data to back up that they were making the right choice, and probably some of them are using data like this, I just don't know about it, but just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, well, we listen. Our team would love to pull data even for your research if it's and pro bono, just to get the wheels
Wow.
turning. But
Well,
but
I love it.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll throw. I'll send you what I've got. We've actually been working on this for several months. We've created a database of all of the new celebrity-backed restaurants since 2019. So, and
oh
where they
wow,
are and what kind of properties they're in. It's been a huge, huge project.
amazing. That's
Uh,
amazing. Yeah, would love to see how we could enrich that.
oh, that's so cool. Okay, well, we'll talk about that more offline. But this is great. This is great. Um, Well, so just backing it up for a second. So you've got a database of all of these different kinds of cultural entities. And I told you a band, and you gave me back a restaurant. What is the farthest apart, like, that you can get with these things that you've seen, like, that are really disparate
That's
things?
what the AI really does is it allows us to take we have very strong signal, very strong corpus, but it allows us to find pathways with very far apart things. So even at times where there's no explicit, so just as an example, being able to predict the literary preferences of someone in a particular block in Brooklyn, like that's a very attenuated set of things to kind of generate predictions against. But what Qloo has done at scale is we're correlating not only the individual inputs, and I like to describe it as kind of not to get too mathematical, but we model not only the entities and their relationships, but also the first derivative of taste. So, it's not just, for instance, that band you'd mentioned, Neutral Milk Hotel. It's not just it wouldn't just be that static snapshot of that one band. There's a broader point to make that we understand what indie rock is, the constellation of preferences, and just to show the power of that. So and same thing for a restaurant. It's not just the fact that something is a Thai restaurant. As a genre, we understand the conceptual relationships between all these different micro genres. This is a graph. So this is just a sample graph of dining genres. If we were to take three dining genres, Thai, French, and Oaxacan, here's the sort of output that Qloo can now generate, right,
So
from our back
this
end.
looks
So
like a
this is
mind map to me. What?
yeah. So this is literally just showing an export of what Qloo understands. If you were to just give three primary genres of cuisine: Thai, French, and Oaxacan. And these are all the micro. So this is a directed graph for folks that aren't looking at the screen of showing all the different pathways through all the different micro genres of cuisine. So Thai relates to Northern Thai cuisine, which relates to Lana. Then there's Central Thai cuisine. And then how does that connect to French cuisine and Oaxacan cuisine, and so on. So this is just a small snapshot of what's going on under the hood when we learn that two restaurants are transacted. There's a co-purchase history of two restaurants, or a jazz. Another example is if we have an affinity between a jazz club and a particular retailer, we conceptually understand what jazz music is and correlate that up to all the world of music artists as well, and so on. So to kind of reduce that all to your question, we can Qloo is able to make very attenuated inference across the kind of long tail of preferences, and I think that's where the power is. We have over 500 million tastes that we actively monitor and catalog. That's always growing month over month, with the exception of retailers and restaurants that close. Otherwise, it's just accumulating. We're continually learning about new music artists, new films, and that's really our IP, is building this globe spanning graph of culture and taste, and then layering in all the data we have permissions over to help correlate in between them. So you could do very, very interesting things. You can generate at any level of that hierarchy as well, if you wanted to not only predict the specific. Again, it's not just music and then music genres. It could be how to amenitize a property, and what sort of what film genres are most related. And it's interesting. We're seeing a lot of cross pollination with. We work with Netflix. We work with film studios as well. CPG companies are now increasingly looking at physical retail. We had a very large CPG company that opened a restaurant that isn't even their explicit brand, but and so that sort of data, culture and taste doesn't live in these isolated silos. So I think there's a lot to gain from that exploration. One interesting example that Qloo did recently was for a large CPG brand. So this is actually, I think this has a lot of relevance to real estate generally. So we're able, given that cross correlation, we could literally filter down to Walmarts, for instance, nationwide, and you
Okay.
could throw in any taste. So if I wanted to say, what are the most correlated Walmarts of over, and we cover, I think it's in the thousands. I don't know the exact number of merchant IDs within Walmart's universe, but if you're a CPG brand, say you're Jarritos, the soft
Right.
drink brand,
Yeah.
and you wanted to understand your shopper team or whoever wanted to understand how to take it to market, what the most correlated retailers are nationwide within Walmart. So within milliseconds, you could literally pull, and there's obviously there seems to be a sort of skew towards, um, California, where there's probably a large Hispanic population. If I were to clone that request and instead do the most correlated Walmarts to Mountain Dew as an example, we would now have, and again, within milliseconds, but you'd have a very different, all of a sudden you're seeing Florida, Ohio. And so this is, these are just, again, like
So this is the top of this list for the Jarritos example. Like that's specific Walmart where that's most correlated with people that like the Jarritos brand.
exactly, yeah, that's exactly right. And so you can
And it's in
go,
Long Beach, by the
and
way, if anybody's wondering.
and then this is Mountain Dew, and the number one is in Logan, Ohio,
Right.
and then
That
Sandusky, and then
that tracks.
Kissimmee, Florida.
I
So
love
yeah,
it.
there's an amazing ability to kind of translate these tastes. And another example, just as you know, we also deal a lot with store experience. So you imagine a QSR, a large firm, also wanting to understand even within the store what music to play, for instance. And what's amazing about Qloo is this ability to, you can go the other way. So what we've been showing are obviously retail correlations and geospatial. But if you were to say, show me the most correlated music artist to, a hotel across from our New York City office, the Crosby Street Hotel, if I were to do that and compare it to, a hotel, even down to, so Starbucks as an example, we have obviously tens of thousands likely, but if I did one in Japan and Kobe, and I said, show me the most within milliseconds, show me the most correlated music to these two. So this is on the right, you have the Japanese, and, forgive me, I don't recognize any of these artists, but there's
Right. The number one
specificity
artist
to
is
it.
called the number one artist is called Bump of Chicken. Not heard of
Yeah.
that. But you know what? I haven't heard
And
of any of the. Well, okay, so I know Sylvan Esso, but a lot of these artists that are correlated to the Crosby Street Hotel, I don't recognize either.
yeah, it's an interesting, you're going to have all sorts of correlations that are, Clue really, because part of the issue is that the consumer tastes are so fragmented now that it's immensely important to really understand the nuances of taste. And another example, so our heat mapping endpoint is very similar to the geospatial. So this is where you can literally, and this is something we'll be provisioning in the tool for developers. So with the heat mapping tool, you can literally draw a polygon anywhere in the world that we cover. So if I
So
were to
you're
take a
drawing
big
a.
polygon around,
Yeah, I was
yep, a
just gonna say
large
you're
polygon
drawing a
around New York,
polygon around Manhattan.
exactly around Manhattan. And so if we wanted to even, we work with one of the largest ticketing services in the world. And just as an example, this idea where Clue can uniquely cross this geolocational and media nexus. So if I were to say, Michael Bublé overlaid on all of Manhattan, show
Okay.
me, and within milliseconds you'll see the affinity densities of Michael Bublé. So if you were someone who wanted to open the Michael Bublé experience, This is where there might be affinity densities.
Is that
and if I took a very
Midtown?
different, it's kind of Midtown. It looks like a little bit of lower Manhattan, very little upper. If I were to take a very different artist, so if I took Fabulous, for instance, who's a hip hop artist, you would see a very different. Michael Bublé
Right.
and Fabulous are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, and within milliseconds you're getting, and more than that, Qloo's giving its customers the raw ingredients here. So we're not just saying here's a JPEG of this heat map. We're saying here's the actual, if you consume our API, we're giving you every object, every latitude and longitude, together with the affinity scores and all the different evaluation metrics. So you can create your own. The most sophisticated users can ultimately create their own. They could import this into Tableau, their own proprietary tooling. They could also create their own kind of their composite map. So if you have everything from layering in your own inventory overlaid on this, we've had great success with JC2Co. So we obviously service the programmatic side of things, decisioning what ad is shown, on a real time basis on their digital inventory. But there's a lot of static out of home where they've been leveraging this to great effect within their own tooling.
Yeah.
Now you understand, James, why we are so excited about
Yeah.
this technology, right? Qloo is a game changer, and you understand now why we thought it had real application in the real estate industry.
This is fantastic. So we are out of time, but if folks want to learn more, it's Qloo, Qloo. Qloo.com. So Alex Elias, CEO and co-founder of Qloo, thank you so much for joining me. And Sam Delisi with Moderne Ventures, thank you for joining me as well.
Thank you for having me.
If you like this podcast, do me a favor, go into the app you're listening to and give us a rating. Even better, write a little review, just a sentence about something that you liked about the show. You can subscribe to Where We Buy on the iPhone podcast app, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on the web at wherewebuy.show. Now, we're doing more and more video podcasts like this one, which if you're listening to and you want to see the video version, head on over to our channel on YouTube called Everything We Know About Retail. Check it out at everythingweknow.show. Now, if you've got specific questions about retail, shopping centers, or retail real estate, feel free to connect with me and send me a message on LinkedIn. Just search for James Cook, JLL. And our theme music is Run in the Night by the Good Lords under Creative Commons license. Awesome. That's it. We're done.